Have you ever listened to a politician speak and just had this feeling that something's not adding up? You know, the words they're saying point one way, but reality seems to be heading in the complete opposite direction? It can feel like you're watching a game, but nobody ever told you the rules. Well, today, we're going to pull back the curtain and show you exactly what those rules are. Okay? Let's get into it.
All right, check this out. This is from the 1932 Democratic Party platform in the US. And look how specific it is. This wasn't some vague suggestion. It was a crystal clear, ironclad promise to the American people. We will slash government spending by a quarter, and we will balance the budget. Every single year.
So, what happened next? Well, if you know your history, you know the answer is the exact opposite. The administration that ran on this platform gave us the New Deal, one of the biggest expansions of government spending the country had ever seen. So what gives? How does a promise to spend less lead to spending massively more?
And that right there is the heart of what we're tackling today, this puzzle of political double talk. There's this huge gap between what political language says it's doing and what it actually does, and we're about to hand you the decoder ring.
Here's the secret. Every political message has two meanings playing at the same time, the formal meaning and the real meaning. The formal meaning is that big idealistic goal you hear about, world peace, a fair society, a balanced budget. But underneath that, there's always a real meaning, a concrete, practical goal that's all about a struggle for power. A classic example is Dante's famous political essay. Its formal goal was this grand, utopian vision of a peaceful world empire. Its real goal, to get a foreign king to take over his hometown of Florence. See the difference?
To really get this, let's put two big thinkers side by side. On one hand, you have Dante. His method is basically politics as a wish. He uses these beautiful arguments from religion and philosophy to justify this perfect world he's imagined. And in the process, he hides what he really wants. Then you have Machiavelli. His method is politics as a science. He doesn't care about ideals. He looks at facts, at history, at the world as it is. And he tells you his real goal right up front.
And look at where those different methods lead. Dante's formal goal? A utopian world empire, something that was never, ever going to happen. Machiavelli's stated goal? The unification of Italy, which was a real, achievable political project. One is a daydream, the other is a blueprint.
And this brings us right to the core of it all, the big Machiavellian revelation. When you strip away all the fancy speeches and utopian promises, what is politics really about? It's about this. People and groups of people are in a constant, relentless struggle for power and privilege. That's the game.
So, that's a pretty big idea. And it immediately leads to the next logical question. If politics is just a struggle for power, well, who actually has it?
A political scientist named Gaetano Mosca gave us the answer, and it's a game changer, the concept of the ruling class. He argued that in every single society, no exceptions, two groups always emerge, a small group that rules and a huge group that is ruled. And he said this isn't a flaw in the system, it's a fundamental feature of any organized society.
But why? Why does a tiny minority always end up ruling the massive majority? The answer boils down to one simple, powerful word: organization. An organized minority, acting together with a single purpose, will always beat a disorganized majority where everyone is just acting for themselves.
Mosca himself put it perfectly. He said this domination is inevitable. And it makes sense when you think about it, right? 100 people who are all coordinated and pushing in the same direction can easily overwhelm 1,000 people who are just milling about. The few, when organized, are stronger than the many.
Of course, the rulers can't just come out and say, hey, we're in charge because we're better organized than you. That wouldn't go over too well. So they need a story, a myth that justifies their power and makes it seem right and proper. Mosca called this the political formula. Things like the divine right of kings, or, more recently, the will of the people. It's the formal meaning that makes the real power structure acceptable to everyone else.
Okay, so we know a ruling class exists, and we know why it exists. But how does this elite group actually form in the first place? How does it get locked in? Well, the answer is kind of baked into the very act of getting organized.
The sociologist Robert Michels summed it all up in this brilliant, punchy phrase. He called it the Iron Law of oligarchy. And he argued that this is a process that's basically unavoidable in any group, no matter how democratic it tries to be at the start.
So here's how this iron law works. It's a four-step process that happens almost like clockwork. 1. A group gets organized for some cause. 2.
To actually get things done, they need leaders. 3. Over time, those leaders become experts, they become permanent and indispensable. And 4. Sooner or later, this elite group starts looking out for its own interests, more power, better pay, more prestige, instead of the interests of the people they were supposed to represent.
And look, this isn't just some abstract theory, it's grounded in some very real, practical stuff. The leaders control the money and the internal communications, they develop skills that the average member just doesn't have, and frankly, most members want to be led and are pretty passive about the day-to-day operations. This dynamic is true for literally any organization, from a tiny club to a whole country.
So there you have it, the iron law of oligarchy. And when you really think about it, it's pretty bleak, right? It forces us to ask a really uncomfortable question about our most cherished political ideal.
And here it is, the big one. If elite rule is an iron law, then is democracy just a myth? Is the whole idea of rule by the people just another political formula? You know, a nice story we tell ourselves to feel better about the fact that we're always being ruled by a minority?
Now, this is the crucial pivot. The Machiavellian thinkers say, hold on, what if we've been defining democracy all wrong? They argue that if democracy means the people actually rule themselves, then yeah, it's impossible. But what if the real meaning of democracy isn't self-rule, but something else? What if it's liberty, the simple legal right for an opposition to exist and to challenge the people in power?
And this leads to a very stark, maybe even cynical, but incredibly important conclusion. The only thing that can actually keep powerful people in check isn't good intentions or promises. The only effective check on power is other power. The only thing that can rein in the ambition of one group of rulers is the ambition of another group of would-be rulers who want to take their place.
So you might be wondering, how does a bunch of elites fighting with each other actually help me? Well, it helps a lot. The opposition, because it wants to win, has to expose the current ruler's mistakes and abuses. To win your support, both sides are forced to give you things, concessions, reforms. This constant struggle between elites creates an indirect but incredibly powerful check on their power, which is way more effective than anything the masses could do on their own.
Which all points to this really startling but vital truth. Real freedom doesn't come from everybody holding hands and agreeing. It's a product of conflict and competition. A society where everyone is forced into unity is a society without an opposition, and therefore a society without liberty. A truly free society is messy, it's full of disagreement, and it protects the right for that conflict to exist.
So now that we have this decoder ring for politics, we can stop getting fooled by the formal meanings. We can look past the promises and start asking the questions that really matter about where the power truly lies.
And that's the question I want to leave you with. When you look at any political system, especially your own, don't ask, do the people rule? That's the wrong question. Ask this instead. Who checks the powerful? Is there a real legal public opposition that has the freedom to organize and challenge the people in charge? Because according to the Machiavellians, the answer to that question is the true measure of your freedom.